The human lived alone on the far edge of the space colony. His room was small. His job was simple. His life was quiet. Every day he worked long hours repairing old machines and broken cargo drones. Most people passed him without noticing. He was just another worker in a giant metal city floating in space. But he had one strange habit. Every night, before returning to his room, he carried a small box of food scraps, old bread, cold rice, dry meat, nothing special. Things most people threw away without care. He always walked to the dark corner behind the station, near the broken lights and silent pipes. That place was cold and smelled of oil and dust. There, he placed the food gently on the ground. Not for people, not even for pets, but for the stray animals that lived in the shadows of the colony. Small creatures with thin bodies and scared eyes. They hid from humans. They survived on scraps. And most people did not care if they lived or died. But this human cared. Some workers laughed at him. Some called him foolish. Some said, "Why waste food on animals when people are hungry too?" He never replied. He only smiled and continued. Because for him, life was life. And hunger was pain, no matter who felt it. That night was colder than usual. The metal walls of the colony made quiet sounds as they cooled. The air was thin and sharp. The stars outside looked like frozen lights in a dark ocean. The human walked slowly, holding his small box of leftovers. He did not expect anything different. He bent down and placed the food near the wall, just like always. Then he turned around and froze. 3 figures were standing behind him. They were tall and thin. Not animals. Not humans. They were something else. His heart beat fast. His breath stopped for a moment. The figures did not move. They did not attack. They only stood there, watching him with wide glowing eyes. Soft light came from their skin, pale blue and silver. Their shapes were slim and strange, but not scary. Their faces looked young, almost like human girls, but not fully. Their eyes were large. Their ears were long and curved. Their skin shimmered softly in the dark. 3 alien girls. The human took one slow step back. Then another. But they did not follow him. They looked tired. Hungry. Weak. One of the girls held her stomach. Another leaned against the wall as if she could fall at any moment. The human did not know what to do. Aliens were not supposed to be here. The colony was safe. The colony was human space. Or so everyone believed. He slowly raised his hands, not to fight, but to show he was not a threat. The girls whispered to each other in a soft, strange language. Their voices were low and shaking. Then slowly, one of them pointed at the food on the ground. The human blinked. He looked down. Then back at them. They were not here to hurt him. They were here because of the food. Because they were hungry. Very hungry. The human felt something tighten in his chest. These were not monsters. These were not invaders. These were just starving girls far from home. He slowly knelt down again. Carefully, without sudden movement, he pushed the box of food toward them. The girls did not move at first. They looked at each other, then at him, then back at the food. For a moment, the silence felt heavy. Then one of them took a step forward, then another. Slowly, like frightened animals, they came closer. Their hands were thin, their fingers long and shaking. One of them touched the food, then quickly pulled her hand back. Afraid, the human stayed still. He did not speak. He did not move. Finally, the smallest of the 3 took a piece of bread. She sniffed it, then took a small bite. Her eyes widened. She looked at the others, and suddenly, all 3 began to eat. Not fast. Not wild, but like those who had not eaten in a very long time, and were afraid the food would disappear. The human watched silently. He did not smile. He did not cry. But inside his heart something broke and healed. At the same time, he understood now. The leftovers he left for animals were never meant for animals. They were meant for them. For these 3 lost alien girls hiding in the dark of a human colony. One of the girls looked up at him while chewing. Her eyes were full of fear, but also a small spark of hope. The human slowly lowered his hands. He spoke softly. You're safe, for now. They did not understand his words, but they understood his tone, because kindness does not need translation. And in that cold, dark corner of the space colony, a simple human and 3 hungry alien girls met for the first time, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as lives connected by hunger and mercy. The human did not leave after they finished eating. He stayed there, standing quietly under the weak colony lights. The 3 alien girls sat close to each other, holding the empty food box like it was something precious. Their thin shoulders moved slowly as they breathed. They looked less weak now, but still very tired. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was heavy. Then, suddenly, one of the girls flinched. A distant sound echoed through the metal hall's footsteps. The human turned his head quickly. Colony patrol. 2 guards were walking far down the corridor, their boots loud against the metal floor. The alien girls froze. Their eyes widened in fear. They moved back into the shadows without a word, pressing their bodies against the cold wall like scared children. The human understood. Immediately. They were hiding, not because they were criminals, but because they were not allowed to exist here. The guards passed by without stopping. Their lights swept over the walls, but did not reach deep into the dark corner. When the sound of footsteps faded, the alien girls slowly relaxed. One of them sank to the ground, shaking. The human took a slow breath. This place was no longer safe. He looked at the girls more carefully now. Their clothes were torn and dirty. Small cuts covered their arms. Their feet were bare against the cold metal floor. They had walked a long way. They had suffered, and yet they were still here. Alive. One of the girls stepped forward. Again, she touched her chest softly and said something in her strange language. Then she pointed at the human and tilted her head. She was trying to speak, trying to understand him. The human slowly touched his own chest. Human, he said clearly. She repeated softly, Who, man? A weak smile appeared on her face. The human pointed at the place around them. Colony, he said. She looked confused. Then one of the other girls pointed upward, toward the sky beyond the metal walls. She made a slow falling motion with her hand. Crash. The human's eyes widened. A ship? He asked quietly. They nodded. Slowly. Their ship had crashed. Far from their home. Far from safety. And now they were trapped inside human space. No food. No shelter. No protection. Only fear. The human looked at them with new understanding. They were not spies, not soldiers. They were survivors. And survivors are always dangerous. Not because they want to hurt others, but because they are desperate to live. Another sound came from far away. This time, a siren. Soft, but clear. The colony was announcing a security alert. The girls' faces turned pale. One of them grabbed the human's sleeve, her hand cold and shaking. Her eyes begged him for something. Help. The human felt the weight of that moment. He could walk away, forget what he saw, go back to his small room and quiet life, or he could become part of their story. He looked down at her hand on his sleeve. Slowly, gently. He placed his own hand over hers. Then he nodded. Without words, without promises, but with meaning. He pointed down a narrow side tunnel behind him. Dark. Hidden. Few people used it. Come, he said softly. They did not understand the word, but they understood his gesture. They followed him. Silently. Carefully. Every sound felt loud. Every shadow felt alive. They moved through tight metal paths where pipes hung from the ceiling, and steam hissed from broken vents. The human walked first. The girls stayed close behind him. At one point, one of them slipped. He caught her before she fell. Their eyes met in that moment. Fear slowly changed into trust. They reached a small storage room, forgotten and unused. The door creaked as he opened it. Inside was darkness and dust, but it was hidden, safe. For now, the human closed the door behind them. The girls sat on the floor, their backs against the wall. Tired, safe. One of them looked up at him and asked something softly in her language. He did not understand the words, but he understood the feeling. She was asking why. Why help us? Why risk yourself? The human thought for a moment. Then he said slowly, simply, because you were hungry. They did not understand the words, but they understood the heart. Outside that small dark room, the galaxy was large, cold, cruel, but inside, a simple human had chosen to stand with 3 lost alien girls, and from that moment, nothing would ever be the same again. The small storage room was silent. Only the soft sound of breathing filled the dark space. The 3 alien girls sat on the cold metal floor, their knees pulled close to their chests. The human stood near the door, listening for any sound outside. Every small noise made his heart jump. After a long moment, he slowly relaxed. No footsteps, no alarms. They were safe. For now, the human turned and looked at the girls more closely. In the weak light coming through a small crack in the wall, he could see their faces better. They were young, not children, but not fully grown either. Their eyes were large and deep, shining softly like stars under water. Their skin had strange glowing lines, like gentle light flowing under their flesh. They were beautiful in a quiet, fragile way, but pain lived in their eyes, pain and fear. The human sat down slowly, keeping some distance so he would not scare them. One of the girls slowly raised her hand. She pointed at her arm. There was a deep burn mark there. Not fresh, but not healed either. The human's face tightened. He carefully took off his jacket and tore a small clean piece from it. Slowly, gently, he wrapped it around her wound. She watched him with wide eyes. In her world, someone touching her like that only meant danger. But this touch was different. It was careful, soft, kind. Her eyes slowly filled with tears. She touched his hand lightly, then pulled her hand back quickly, as if afraid to stay too close. The other 2 girls watched quietly. One of them spoke in a soft voice, full of sadness. The human did not understand the words, but he understood the story in her eyes. They had not always been like this. Once they had a home. One of the girls pointed upward again, then drew a broken circle in the air. Then she closed her hand tightly. Their ship. Destroyed. Gone. The human closed his eyes for a moment. Space was cruel, not because of monsters, but because of distance. Because when help is far away, even the kind can die alone. He opened his eyes again and looked at them. You are strong, he said quietly. They did not know the words, but they felt the meaning. Another girl then touched her throat and shook her head slowly. No voice. No call. No signal. They could not ask for help. They were invisible in a human world. The human felt anger rise in his chest. Not anger at the girls. Anger at the system. At the cold rules that said, these lives matter. Those lives do not. He stood up slowly. He walked to a small metal cabinet in the corner. He opened it and found a water bottle and 2 dry food packs. He placed them gently on the floor in front of the girls. They stared at the food. Then at him. Then back at the food. They did not rush this time. They waited. They were no longer just hungry. They were unsure. Was this real? Was this safe? The human nodded slowly. They began to eat, but now they ate calmly. Like guests, not like hunted animals. As they ate, the smallest of the 3 suddenly began to cry quietly. Tears rolled down her glowing cheeks and fell onto the floor. The other 2 moved close to her and held her. The human did not interrupt. He understood. Sometimes tears come not because of pain, But because pain is finally over. After some time, the crying stopped. The girl looked up at him. Then slowly, very slowly, she bowed her head, a sign of thanks. The human felt something heavy in his chest. He was just one man. No weapon. No power. No authority. But at this moment, he was their world. A sudden loud sound echoed outside. Metal hitting metal. The girls jumped. Fear returned to their eyes. The human walked to the door quietly and listened. A guard's voice passed by. Laughing. Talking. Not searching. Not yet. But soon. He turned back to the girls. We cannot stay here, he said softly. They did not understand the words, but they understood his face. Serious. Concerned. Yet calm. He pointed at himself, then at them. Then made a moving motion with his hand. We go. Together. One of the girls stood up slowly. Then another. Then the third. They were no longer just following him. They were choosing him, and in that choice, something changed. The human was no longer just a kind stranger. He was now their protector. And they were no longer just hungry aliens. They were part of his life, part of his fate. Outside, the colony lights shined cold and bright. But somewhere in the dark halls of metal and steel, a simple human was quietly becoming something rare in the galaxy. Shield for the forgotten. The colony never slept. Even when most lights dimmed, the low sound of machines never stopped. Pipes hissed. Doors opened and closed. Somewhere far away, engines hummed like a giant breathing in the dark. The human walked slowly through a narrow passage, leading the three alien girls behind him. He chose the old routes, paths most people had forgotten. Places where cameras did not work anymore, where the colony was blind. The girls moved carefully, their bare feet making almost no sound on the cold metal floor. Every shadow made them pause. Every echo made their hearts beat faster. The human stopped suddenly and raised his hand. The girls froze. He leaned forward and looked around the corner. Two guards were standing near the main corridor, talking loudly and laughing. Their lights were bright. Too bright. The human slowly stepped back. He looked at the girls and made a small gesture for them to hide. They moved quietly into a dark space. Between two large pipes, the human stood alone near the corner, pretending to fix something on the wall. The guards passed by without looking at him. One of them said, "Strange. I thought I saw movement." The other laughed. "Probably rats again. Who cares?" They walked away. The human waited until the sound of their boots faded. Only then did he turn back to the girls. Their faces were pale, their eyes full of fear. Something new. Trust. He did not smile. He did not speak. He simply nodded. They continued moving. After a long walk, they reached a small, forgotten maintenance room near the lower levels of the colony. The door was old and scratched. No one used it anymore. The human opened it slowly. Inside was darkness, dust, and silence. But it was safe. For now. The girls entered carefully and sat down. Tired and shaking, the human closed the door and leaned against it, breathing deeply. For the first time since he met them, his hands were shaking, not because he was weak, but because he knew what he was doing. He was breaking the rules. The colony law was clear. No unauthorized alien life forms. Report immediately. But he did not report them. He hid them, and that made him a criminal. The human looked at his hands. These hands repaired machines, lifted heavy parts, fed animals. Now, these hands were protecting lives the colony did not want. One of the girls slowly stood up and walked toward him. She looked small next to him. Fragile. Yet brave. She reached out and gently touched his arm. He looked down at her. Her eyes were calm now, still afraid, but no longer lost. She placed her hand on her chest and spoke softly. A single word. He did not understand the sound, but he understood the meaning. She was calling him something, not human, not stranger. Something more, something like Guardian. The human swallowed slowly. He felt a strange weight on his heart. He was just a worker, just a man, but in their eyes, he was hope. He knelt down slowly and looked at them at eye level. "You cannot stay here forever," he said quietly. They did not understand the words, but they understood his eyes. He was thinking, planning, searching for a future for them. The smallest girl walked toward him and gently pulled at his sleeve. Then she pointed toward the ceiling, toward the stars. Then she shook her head slowly. "No home. No ship. No way back." The human closed his eyes for a moment. He knew the truth. Sending them back was impossible. Keeping them hidden forever was impossible. 2. The colony would find them, sooner or later, and when that happened, the result would not be kind. The human opened his eyes again. Quiet fire burned inside them, now. Not anger, not hatred, but something stronger. Decision. He stood up slowly. He walked to a small console in the corner of the room and turned it on. The screen flickered to life. Old maps appeared, lower sectors, cargo tunnels, black market docks. The places where the colony's laws were weak, the places where forgotten people and forgotten things went. The human pointed at one place on the fun place. Screen. Far from the main city. Hidden. A place where no one asked too many questions. The girls looked at the screen. Then at him. Then back at the screen. They did not know what the place was, but they understood what it meant. Escape. Not running away, but moving forward. The human turned and looked at them. Slowly, carefully, he placed his hand over his heart, then pointed at them. Then made a small circle around all of them with his hand. Together. One by one, the girls stood up. They stepped closer to him. No longer behind him, beside him. They were no longer just survivors. They were now a group. Small family made in shadows and silence. Outside, the colony light still shined cold and bright, but somewhere deep in its forgotten levels, a human had chosen to stand alone against the system. Not with weapons, not with power, but with something far more dangerous to injustice. A heart that refused to turn away. The lower levels of the colony were darker than the rest. Lights flickered. Walls were old and broken. The air smelled of oil and rust. The human walked carefully, leading the 3 alien girls through narrow metal paths. Every step echoed softly. Even when they tried to be silent, the place felt forgotten. But forgotten places are never truly empty. The girls stayed close to him now, not because he told them to, but because they wanted to. They trusted him, and that made what came next even harder. Suddenly, a sharp light flashed behind them. "Stop right there!" A loud voice filled the tunnel. The human froze. The girls turned quickly, fear flooding their eyes. 2 guards stepped out from behind a metal door, their weapons raised. Their faces were hard, cold. "You," one of them said, pointing at the human. "Step away from them." The human slowly moved in front of the girls. He spread his arms slightly, like a wall. "They are not dangerous," he said calmly. The guards laughed. "Not dangerous?" One said. "They are illegal, and you are hiding them." The girls held onto each other. One of them whispered something in fear. The human felt his heart beat hard in his chest, but his voice stayed steady. "They are starving, lost. They need help, not chains." The guards stepped closer. The metal floor vibrated under their boots. "Move," one of them said again. "This is your last warning." The human did not move. He looked at the guards, then at the girls, then back at the guards. "If you take them," he said quietly, "you take me too." The guards paused. They did not expect that. One of them lowered his weapon slightly. "Why?" he asked. "Why risk your life for creatures that are not even your kind?" The human answered simply, "Because they are alive." For a moment, the tunnel was silent. Then alarms began to sound, loud, sharp, angry, red. Lights started flashing on the walls. The guards looked at each other. Someone reported movement. One said. More footsteps echoed from far away. More guards were coming. The human knew. They could not win here, not with force. Not with numbers. But humans were known in the galaxy for something else. Not for strength. Not for speed, but for thinking. When others panicked. The human suddenly grabbed a small metal pipe from the ground and threw it hard against the wall. The loud crash echoed through the tunnel. The guards turned their heads. For just 1 second. That was enough. Run! The human shouted. He grabbed the nearest girl's hand and pulled her forward. The other two followed. Without thinking, they ran. The alarm screamed louder. Lights flashed wildly. Their feet pounded against the metal floor. The tunnel split into 2 paths. The human chose the darker one, behind them. Voices shouted. Weapons fired, hitting walls and pipes, sending sparks into the air. One of the girls stumbled. The human turned back and lifted her into his arms without slowing. He did not drop her. He did not hesitate. He carried her and kept running. They reached a heavy metal door. Locked. The human slammed his hand on the control panel. Nothing. The door did not open. The girls looked at him with fear. The shouting was closer now. The human closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he punched the emergency release. Sparks flew. The door opened slowly with a loud groan. He rushed them inside and closed it behind them. The room was dark and full of old cargo boxes. They hid between them, breathing hard. The human listened. Footsteps passed outside. Voices shouted, but they did not enter. After a long moment, silence returned. The girls slowly looked up at him. Their eyes were full of shock, but also something else. Respect. One of them touched his face gently. Her hand was warm. Her eyes spoke what words could not. He did not just protect them. He fought for them, not with violence, but with courage. The human leaned against a box and slowly slid to the floor. For the first time, he felt tired, truly tired, but he also felt something stronger than fear. Purpose. Outside, the colony hunted them, but inside that dark cargo room, a simple human and 3 alien girls became more than survivors. They became a symbol the galaxy was not ready for, but could never ignore again. The cargo room was silent. Only slow breathing filled the dark space. The human sat on the cold floor, his back against a metal box. The 3 alien girls sat close to him now, not apart, not afraid of his presence. Were no longer just hiding. They were waiting. Waiting for the next move. After some time, the human slowly stood up and opened one of the old cargo boxes. Inside, he found dusty blankets and broken tools. He gave each girl a blanket. They wrapped them around their thin bodies. Finally feeling some warmth. The smallest girl smiled softly. It was the first real smile he had seen from them. Forced. Not afraid. Real. The human felt his chest tighten in a strange way. Outside, far above the lower levels, the colony was not silent anymore. Security reports spread. A human worker was helping illegal aliens. Human had blocked guards. A human had escaped with 3 unknown alien girls. The story moved through screens and whispers like fire through dry grass. Some called him a traitor. Some called him foolish. Listened more closely. A group of dock workers spoke quietly in a corner. A medical officer paused at the report and frowned. A traitor from another species read the news twice. Across the colony, something rare was happening. People were asking questions, not about rules, but about right and wrong. One of the alien girls slowly pointed at a small screen on the wall inside the cargo room. It flickered with weak power, showing silent news images. She saw her own face, captured by a camera earlier. Her eyes widened. Fear returned. They know us. Her body seemed to say. The human stepped closer and gently turned the screen off. They may know your faces, he said softly, but they do not know your story. He sat back down. And stories change everything. The girls did not understand the words, but they understood his calm. That calm gave them strength. Elsewhere in the galaxy, far beyond the human colony, the story did not stay small. A trader ship carried the news to another system. A signal relay sent it further. A curious alien journalist picked it up. Soon, different species were speaking about it. Not loudly, not proudly, but carefully. Did you hear? A human protected 3 starving aliens. He broke colony law for them. He stood between weapons and lives. Many species found this strange. In their worlds, rules were above lives. Strength was above mercy. But humans were different. Back in the cargo room, one of the alien girls slowly stood up and walked to the human. She knelt in front of him. Slowly, respectfully, a gesture of deep honor in her culture. The other 2 followed. The human was shocked. Quickly stood and raised his hands. No, he said softly. I am not a king, not a hero. But the girls did not rise. In their eyes, he was something their world had never given them. A protector without chains, a leader without fear, a guardian without demand. For the first time, the human truly understood something. This was no longer just about saving 3 girls. This was about showing the galaxy another way to live. A way where kindness was not weakness, where mercy was not shame. Where one human could stand and make the stars listen. Suddenly, a soft knock came on the cargo room door. The girls jumped. The human slowly moved forward. He placed his hand on the door. Another knock. Soft. Careful. Not like guards, not like hunters. The human opened the door slowly. A man stood there, a colony medic. His eyes were tired, but kind. I followed the signals, the medic said quietly. I saw what you did. The human prepared himself for betrayal, but the medic shook his head slowly. They are hurt, the medic said, and I can help. The human looked at the girls, then back at the medic. Why? He asked. The medic smiled sadly. Because someone has to start choosing lives over laws. In that moment, the human knew they were no longer alone, and when humans stop being alone, the galaxy starts to change. The medic worked quietly. His hands were gentle as he cleaned the wounds on the alien girls' arms and legs. He gave them warm food and clean water. For the first time since their ship crashed, they were treated like people, not like problems. The girls watched him with wide eyes. They had never seen a human help without asking for something in return. The help without asking for something in return. Human stood near the door, watching carefully, not because he did not trust the medic, but because he had learned something important. When you protect the weak, you must never stop watching. After some time, the medic finished his work and stood up slowly. They will live, he said softly. The human closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. Relief washed over him like warm light, but danger still lived outside those walls. The colony leaders were angry. They called meetings. They demanded answers. They wanted the girls handed over. But something unexpected happened. Workers spoke up. Medics spoke up. Even some guards spoke up. Not loudly, not bravely, but enough. They said they were starving. They were not armed. They were not attacking anyone. They were just trying to live. And slowly, like cracks forming in hard stone, the rules began to bend. The human was called before the colony council. He stood alone in a large metal room, surrounded by cold faces and sharp eyes. 3 alien girls watched from behind a glass wall. Afraid, silent, waiting. The leader of the council spoke. You broke the law, the leader said. You endangered the colony. The human looked up calmly. He did not shout. He did not beg. He only said, if saving lives is a crime, then maybe your laws are broken. The room fell silent. No one had expected that. Some were angry. Some were shocked. But some were thinking. The council looked again at the Images, 3 thin girls, shaking, hungry, alone. Then they looked at the human, tired, wounded, standing, not for power, not for pride, but for mercy. Her a long time. The leader spoke again. They will not be taken, he said slowly. They will be protected. Under colony care. A soft sound escaped the human's chest. Not a cheer, not a cry, just a breath he had been holding for too long. The glass wall opened. The 3 girls ran to him. They held his arms, his back, his hands, not like prisoners, not like victims, but like family. From that day on, the story spread across the stars, not as a tale of war, not as a tale of conquest, but as a tale of a single human who refused to look away. Other species listened. Some laughed, some doubted, but many remembered. Because the galaxy is full of powerful beings, but it is rare to find a kind one, and humans became known not just as fighters, but as protectors of the forgotten. Years later, ships from different worlds came to the colony, not to fight, but to learn. To see the place where a human chose mercy over fear. The 3 alien girls grew stronger. They learned human words, human ways, but they never forgot. They told their people, humans do not rule with fear, they rule with heart. And the human, he still left food behind the station every night. Not because he had to, but because kindness had become part of who he was. Once, it was leftovers for stray animals. Now, it was a message to the universe that no matter how cold the stars are, single human can bring warmth. And that is why the galaxy will never forget humanity.